Good morning, everybody. Here we are, Kuntres Bikkur Chicago, touching a city's soul. We are currently on Ice Gimel, on the third chapter, which is page 57. Yesterday, we gave an introduction about Das. We also spoke about the beauty and the importance, the very, very big importance in having some sort of idea of the structure. And again, as I explained a million times over, I hope it was very, very clear, this is not an actual physical depiction of the actual physical Kav and Seder Shtalshlus, but just so we have an appreciation, because today we're going to discuss the different worlds, an appreciation that Hashem, the way Hashem used to be, is that he was taking up the full extent of existence. You can't even say that because you can't say that Hashem existed. But anyway, so that was, Hashem was the full paper. Then he made an empty space. And in that empty space, in his own Play-Doh space, so to speak, he made a kav going down. And through that, Hashem made different levels of contraction, so to speak, that kind of like convert nothingness into somethingness. And so as much as the Eivester is infinite, he made this incredible process through which the infinite becomes finite and becomes our world. So again, this is not an actual depiction of how it works, but it's just to give us a visual for us to work with today. And we're going to actually use it in our learning. We also had a beautiful discussion about Das in general, what it means to have Das. Das is one of my favorite topics in Chassidus, because Das is the difference between being an intellectual, exclusively intellectual student versus really making that change, that impact, and living with Chassidus. Das is this key component that gets us to appreciate what we're learning. It doesn't just stay in an abstract concept. It actually affects us, kind of like the mashal I gave yesterday, that if I were to tell you and describe to you about this feline and it's orange with stripes and sharp teeth and whiskers, you may not exactly know what I'm talking about. Then the next thing I do is I show you a picture of a tiger and you'll be like, oh, it's a tiger. But then if we do a Living Chassidus trip to the safari and we actually get approached by a tiger and we see those quite sharp teeth, the effect, our relationship with this concept will be a lot stronger, will be a lot more real and relevant. And so therefore that sense of Das, that bond. So Das in many locations is explained as a bond, a connection. So Das is very similar to Skashas in a certain sense, because once you have Das, I mean, you could have, I'm sure, at a certain point in your life, you could have seen a picture of the Rebbe and, okay, the holy man, somebody once asked me how I have my amazing farbrengens with my cleaning lady. So my cleaning lady kind of like said, everybody has this picture of this guy. I said, yeah, well, he's, I'm like, how do I explain a Rebbe in 1 foot in Spanish? So I was like, he's a rabbi, So again, going from he's our rabbi to real Das, to real understanding and bonding and relationship, it's a step. And yesterday, in one of the questions after the recording ended, we actually had a beautiful discussion as well about, there was a question about whether Das it's only when it's experienced, kind of like the tiger. Like, is there a way to have Das without having an experience? And there is, and that's actually what is the process of learning Chassidus. We may not, and actually we're going to discuss it today in our maamer, we may not feel, the godly concepts that we're discussing, even though we know that in our room right now, wherever you are, Atzilus exists in that room. There's no Atzilus location. There's famous joke that when you're in an airplane, you're closer to God. It's like, no, there's no higher. It's not like when you fly, you're closer to Atzilus. Atzilus is literally, there is no physical location, which means Atzilus is literally everywhere. We just don't have the antenna, so to speak. We don't have the Wi-Fi machine our phone, it has a specific receptor to be able to be sensitive to the Wi-Fi radio waves. So too with a radio way back when, FM and AM, right? So all those, they have a receptor that's able to tune into these waves that we may not see with our own eyes, we may not feel, but they're there. So too here, there is Atzilus in your room. There are all the Malachim, and the entire Seder Shtalshlus is right there with you. And that in of itself is it's a meditation we should have, because it helps you live in a whole new holy perspective. But the point is, there is no physical location, and so therefore, having a sensor, being able to sense and feel, you can actually, just even by me saying this, I'm sure many of you are having a deeper thought of like, whoa, what's going on in this room? Like I may not feel it, but yes, Atzilus and Briya and Sarah, it's all here right there with you. So das can be accomplished even if you don't fully feel or experience such a thing, but working on having an appreciation for it can give you das, okay? So now that we said that, and hopefully that gave a little bit more clarity, we're going to discuss the difference between the das of an animal, of a behema, of an animal, versus the das of a human. And in this context, we mean that an animal might see, the cell phone doing its thing, but it won't understand what exactly it's happening. It's this like deeper level of like, it doesn't, and even as I said yesterday, even if we manage, I don't know if it has been done, but if we manage to get a monkey to read, the monkey's it doesn't have the capability of das to such an extent to be able to understand what's really happening, what the concepts it's talking about. So human beings as a whole, we are endowed with this incredible sense of das. That said, there are two types of das. There's das of the intellect, and then there's also, I'm sure there's many other types of das, but in regards to our maamer, there's also the das of feeling spirituality. So we may, as I said, we are not naturally endowed, and there's this famous story of the Alter Rebbe that was during his incarceration. The Alter Rebbe was put in solitary confinement, and there was no windows. They kept him completely locked up, that he was not able to tell what time it was, and they were trying to mess with him and trying to confuse him. And so they came in at different times and fed him breakfast or lunch or whatever, and would wake him up at random times and tell him no, now it's in the afternoon, and meanwhile it was 2 a.m. or whatnot. And it reached the point where the Alter Rebbe said, I know this is not true. I know this because the malachim that are singing now are the malachim for this specific time. So the Alter Rebbe had this kind of like the phone has a specific receptor to be able to be sensitive to Wi-Fi and to connect to the Wi-Fi that we don't have in our brains. The Alter Rebbe has this receptor to be able to have this sensitivity, this das, this real bond and connection with spirituality that many of us don't have. And so we're going to discuss what that means and how having that sensitivity, how it can make a difference in our lives. Okay. So we are currently on page 57 of the maamer, and we are on we're going to start by the paragraph that begins up until this point, okay? So up until this point, the Rabbi Ayatz explained that Moshe is written without a pause in the cantillation because there is no change between his soul above and its root and its manifestation below in the lower worlds. Now, the Rabbi Ayatz adds a further point that as a result of this lack of change, being that the soul of Moshe is particularly, pristine the entire way through, there is no change, even though it went through Seder Shtalshlus, Moshe was able to impart this quality to the Jewish people as well. Because Moshe's soul was exactly perfectly pristine the entire way through, therefore he's able to give us this sense, this quality. He's able to impart that in all of us. It is written, behold, I will sow the house of Israel with the seed of man, Zera Adam, and the seed of animals, Zera Behema. Okay, so now again, the Friedrich Rebbe is going to take us, we're going to go delve deeply into what's this difference between Zera Adam and Zera Behema. And once we understand that, we're going to come back out and say, that's what we're trying to say in regards to the general concept. Okay? The difference between humans and animals that man has das, introspective consciousness, and an animal does not have das, right? So we explained this part already. So too concerning souls. Zera Adam are souls of the world of Atzilus, who are referred to as children of the omnipresent. B'nei l'makim. In other words, just like the superiority of man over animals is that he possesses das, understanding and feeling, so too these souls have great das and godliness, right? So if a neshama comes from the source, their source of their neshama comes from Atzilus, then they have this quote-unquote receptor das thing that they're able to actually have a sense, a feeling, actually able to be sensitive, to be in tune with godliness in this world. They're able to feel the Atzilus in their room. I am not. I know the concept and I'm able to understand the concept and explain the concept, but I don't actually feel the Atzilus in the room. Okay, so somebody with a soul that is rooted in Atzilus does have that sensitivity. Das does not only mean knowledge about godliness, but actual conscious awareness, an actual feeling of godliness. Zera Behema, however, are those souls that do not have a das and godliness to the same extent. These are the souls of the worlds of Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya, which comprise almost all the souls of our generation. The souls of Atzilus are exceptionally lofty and are very rare, even in earlier generations. 1 second. Where is here it is. Okay, so what does this mean? For somebody whose soul is rooted in Atzilus, right? So the soul is rooted here, and as it goes through, it may be, just like we said about Avram's neshama, that Avram's neshama was actually affected throughout this process. But in reality, as it goes through, it's still, by the time it gets to our world in Asiya, by the time it reaches our world, it still is able to have a sensitivity, a das, a specific sensitivity receptor to Kedusha even in this world. So for example, there's many times in our lives where we literally feel, or don't feel, I'm saying we experience miracles. You know, my windows of my apartment look onto Kingston. And it's insane how many times I see people crossing the street. They're not really paying attention, whether they have headphones, they're looking down at their phone, whatever it is. And they're literally saved by like a car just like missing them very, very, very slightly. And they continue walking, listening to their music or listening to their shir, and they continue walking, looking down at their phones, and they did not see the incredible nace, the incredible miracle that the Eibusher just did for them. So many of us walk around with miracles being dropped, you know, left and right, but we don't appreciate. We don't, and it's not our fault, you know. In a certain sense, we weren't endowed with such a. That said, I want to give a disclaimer. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't work and learn Chassidus and try to get ourselves in tune, and that's what it says. Zara Behema, however, are those souls that do not have das and godliness to the same extent. We can sensitize ourselves to these things. The more we learn, the more we and not just learn. I spoke about this yesterday in the questions after shir, that it's not just about learning, it's about saying, what does this do for me? If you learn a concept and you read a ton of mafarshim and you like delve deeply into it, but at the end of the day, you close the book and it does not make an effect in your life. It doesn't make an impact. There's no, even if it's not Chassidus, whatever it is, it needs to be learned in a sense with the last question, the last active, proactive step in learning needs to be, what can I learn from this? How can this make an impact in my life? How can I live with this concept, right? That's das. How can I relate and bond to it? How can this make a change in my avodah? That's das. So that's a next step. So even after we, finish off this shir, say, okay, what does this mean for me? Take a moment, just a moment, say, what does this mean for me? How can I connect to this concept in my life, right? And that will begin to give you the sense of das. So we can, even if our neshama is not from Atzilus, even if the source of our neshama is from Bria, Yetzira, or Asiya, and it comes down and it has less of a sensitivity, it doesn't have that innate, receptor, we can work on building that receptor for Kedusha. We can work on building that receptor for godliness. Okay, page 59. This does not mean that they, the souls of Zerah Behema, are without intellect and understanding of godliness. It doesn't mean that, we're literal animals, chas v'shalom. We do have intellect, and we do have understanding of godliness. We have this capability. Rather, although they do have intellect and understanding, comprehending and intellectually grasping the greatness of the blessed Creator from holy books and scholars, experiencing a deep comprehension and understanding of how God vitalizes and brings into being the worlds and all created beings, and how His greatness is unfathomable. Nevertheless, since these concepts are not actually felt and internalized within their souls, so that it resonates soundly within their das, such souls are referred to as Zerah Behema. So we have the ability to do this. We have the ability to raise our consciousness. We have the ability to learn a maamer and put on our Hashem glasses. We have the ability to really bond and connect, but we don't have this innate sensitivity. We can't just, I was recently, I have it here actually. My newest one of my newest favorites, this book just came out, The Life and Times of Rebbetzin Rivka. It's actually so beautiful that I'm like going from the Frierdiker Rebbe to the Frierdiker Rebbe to the Frierdiker Rebbe. But this is the Frierdiker Rebbe's grandmother, which is Rebbe Marash's wife, and it's sections, historical sketches from the diary of Rabbi Yosef Yitzhak Lubavitch. So it's the Frierdiker Rebbe writes in different parts about her life. And there's a famous story of her, if I understand correctly, it's her great-grandfather. When he passed away, it was in the times of the Alter Rebbe, and the Alter Rebbe came and said, like, I don't understand how this neshama, how the soul of this person who passed, how it's possible that he's in such a high, lofty place in Gan Eden. And he kept asking, like, tell me stories. What did he do in his life? What did he do in his life? What did he do in his life? Baruch Hashem, there's a beautiful story, not for now, but it's a beautiful, beautiful story of what he did in his life. And it was absolutely just above and beyond anything. And then once the Alter Rebbe heard the story, now I understand why his neshama is in such a place. So you and I'll speak for myself. I don't know where people's neshamas are in levels of Gan Eden. I don't have that in tune sensitivity. I don't have that, Wi-Fi receptor to be able to know where people's neshamas are in Gan Eden. The Alter Rebbe, on the other hand, he has a neshama from Atzilus, and so therefore he has this innate sensitivity. That said, we can work on it. We may not reach the point that he does, and I'll speak for myself. I probably won't, but I can still work to have more of a sensitivity for godliness, and I can still, when I see a car flying past Kingston and missing a person by a tiny drop, and that person doesn't notice it, I can have that awareness. I can work on having that awareness. Wow, the Eibusher just did an ace. I need to recognize this is a miracle in my eyes, before my eyes. Okay, so we can. And how do we do this? It says we can do it, comprehending and understanding the greatness of our blessed Creator from holy books and scholars. We can learn. We can learn from books. We can learn from teachers, and we can really work on it. We just don't have the inborn ability. An animal also possesses the spiritual powers of sight and hearing. It sees and hears. However, it doesn't understand what it sees or hears, since it doesn't have das to any significant extent. Similarly, those souls referred to as Zerah Behema do not have das in godliness, since das is conscious awareness that takes place when the intellect and understanding becomes attached and becomes fixed within the soul, as if one actually feels godliness. Okay. So what are we saying? That an animal can't see and hear. So to us, we can definitely, from even just from books, we can hear amazing miracle stories of things that happen. We can see with our own eyes amazing miracle stories that things that happen. We may not fully understand what that means. What does it mean to this incredible miracle? What does that actually mean in relation to like godliness? that said, we can work on it. We can work on being more sensitive to it. For das connotes a bond and a connection to godliness to the extent that the person is consciously aware of the divine presence. As in the pasuk, from my flesh I perceive God. It is as if one actually sees godliness. Even though it is impossible to see godliness with one's physical eyes, nonetheless, this awareness of the divine presence is so concrete that it's comparable to a person who knows and feels the vitalizing nefesh life force within him. Right? So there's many stories of tzaddikim right before they pass that they know that they're about to pass. They know they're about to pass away. They have that sensitivity. They have that to actually see when their neshama is, inside of them, and see when their neshama is beginning to leave. Thus, even though one cannot actually see the nature of the nefesh, how and what it is, he nevertheless feels his nefesh life force by seeing the vitality of his body, vitality that comes from nefesh. And therefore, when a person dies and the nefesh leaves the body is left like an inanimate stone. Even while a person is alive, the level of vitality of his soul is not the same all the time. For example, when a person is asleep, his nefesh leaves his body and only a very basic, I looked this up yesterday, modicum of the life remains in his body. All his important faculties are not revealed as they are when the person is awake, including, for example, the faculties of intellect, sight, and hearing, right? So we, in our lives, we do have this level of sometimes our nefesh is very, very, very grounded in us, so to speak. And sometimes it's partially in and out, but we don't have the sensitivity to know necessarily. For this reason, in a dream, okay, one second, I think we're going to stop here because I think this is getting into a different, we're going to stop here for now. Tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem, we're going to start at the top of page 61 because I realize we're getting into a new concept. Let's just explain what we just explained. Let's just review what we just explained. So what we're saying here is that there's a difference between a neshama whose source is in Atzilus and a neshama whose source is in any one of the other worlds. A neshama whose source is in Atzilus, a neshama straight from Atzilus, has this concept of, that this particular receptor, so to speak, of sensitivity towards godliness, sensitivity towards the spiritual. They already have it. It's innate in them. A person whose neshama is from Bria, Yetzira, or Asiya, the source of their neshama is from those worlds. There's nothing wrong with us. Don't worry. The Friedrich is not here to put us down. What the hell to do? Okay, I'm going to explain that in a minute. So basically, if we're able to understand, again, rewind. It does not mean in any way, shape, or form that the Alter Rebbe the Friedrich Rebbe is putting us down. This is not a put down. This is just a reality where our neshama comes from. So again, if a neshama comes from Atzilus, and as we said in the beginning, just like Moshe, except Moshe's neshama went straight through, then Moshe Rabbeinu and tzaddikim that have such a bracha, so they are able to not just not change, not just that their neshama didn't change, but the reality is that being that neshama from Atzilus has gone straight down without any change whatsoever, he is able to he's able to impart in us this endowment, so to speak, this concept of having having that bond, that relationship, that feeling, that conscious, awareness for godliness. So somebody with a neshama from Atzilus, how much more so, and how much more so Moshe Rabbeinu, whose neshama went straight through without being affected through Seder Shtalshos, is able to endow that in us. And again, this is the main point. We have to delve deeply, understand what's this difference between the neshamas from each location, or what that actually means, and then we're going to go, come back out from that topic and say, okay, this is how it fits within the greater perspective of the maamer. So, for us, so to speak, or I'll speak for myself, I don't know about you guys, maybe some maybe one of you's neshamas from Atzilus. But for me, my neshama must be somewhere from Bria, Yetzirah, or Asiya, because I don't have this innate Wi-Fi receptor to be able to appreciate Kedusha. I'm working on it, and that's what it says. Azer behema, somebody whose neshama comes from one of those levels, can work on it. You can learn from a scholar, you can learn from books, you can work on yourself, and especially work on das. Don't just learn a concept, understand the concept, and then say, how does this relate to my life? How do I live with this concept? And that gives you das. That gives you the difference between seeing a picture of a tiger and really seeing a tiger. So we can work on really seeing godliness in our lives, and we can work on that. That said, it doesn't come innately simple, and we're going to say that this is one of the things that connecting to someone from a neshama from Atzilus can help us have that type of relationship, have that type of bond and das. Okay, I hope everyone enjoyed. I hope it was clear, and I can't wait to see you guys tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem.